Hello, my name is Chaz Miller. I currently am a spaceport engineer at Spaceport America in New Mexico, and I now live in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania in a town called Forty Fort. That's literally the name of the town, Forty Fort. Um, it's near Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm a far away from there right now. It's a very small town. Nothing particularly special about it. Um, it was a nice place to grow up, a very suburban kind of a place with a 40 by 100-foot lot. All the houses kind of were the same. A very nice place. I had a lot of friends there growing up. Um, I would say, as far as how it got me here, nothing particularly special about it. It was a nice, like I said, a good place to grow up. The interest that I got from TV, from reading. I was really an avid reader. I loved books, and I started to read about space and the Earth and sciences. For whatever reason, I don't know why. At a very early age, when I was like 5 or 6, I started reading about that, and I just liked it. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and that sort of drove me forward into doing what I'm doing today. The one thing that really got me started, I mentioned I started reading about science and books that were around the house when I was 5 or 6. When I was 10 is when they first landed on the moon, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin first landed on the moon, and that was, of course, a huge news deal way before it happened. And so there was a lot of anticipation, and it was just really cool to see it happen. And I remember thinking, well, that's something I'd like to be involved with in the future. And it just seemed like it was the future. So that led me in high school to want to take courses that I knew would lead me in that direction. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that you needed math. And I liked math. Math was like learning a language. So in high school, I took some advanced math classes and was encouraged to do that. And the science classes, like I said, so there were biology, and then there was chemistry, and then there was finally physics classes. And being in those classes, I was with a lot of other people who liked the same things I did. People who didn't like math weren't in the same math classes I were, and that was fine. Not everyone I knew liked that, but the people that were in the classes I were in were all sort of interested in the same thing, not necessarily space, but something to do with technology, or something to do with programming in the future. There wasn't even much programming back then. So the classes themselves kind of became a little social group of the people that had the same kind of interest, the same kind of humor. We used to listen to Monty Python all the time. They were on TV in America back then, and so we all had this weird sense of humor. So it was kind of a little nerdy clique, I guess, and it was kind of fun. And but in the meantime, like I said, I was learning physics was the particular subject that really piqued my interest, because of all the sciences, it's the one where you use math to actually predict what's going to happen, and it usually works. So they'd show you little experiments where you'd roll something down a plane and then it would fall, and they'd tell you it would fall a certain kind of arc, and you could find a formula and calculate it exactly where on the ground it landed. Then you'd go measure it. It's like, holy cow, it actually does that, and you'd make measurements and see if you could reproduce that. And it kind of felt like, and I knew that that was a very small step into learning how rockets go into space, how they go into orbits. That's exactly the same equations that people use to figure things like that out. So knowing that I was interested in that, and then having a chance to play around with it, just kept that going. And I've given this message to people who say that we want to talk about careers at the university level or all levels. Is my experience is, you don't know what's going to happen in your life. You're not, whatever you pick, don't get too worried about it. Pick something that you think you'll be interested in, but don't worry that you have to do it for the rest of your life, because you probably won't. You can if you want to, but a lot of times it changes. So like I said, I was studying science, I was studying math, and I had a vague idea that I wanted to be an engineer. And my dad was an engineer, and I didn't even know exactly what he did at work, but it seemed like a good thing to do. I'd heard it's a good way to get a good job. And so I went to college and studied engineering science. It was called. It was very general engineering, and it involved a lot of different fields in engineering. And then towards the end, I specialized in microelectronic circuits. So, and again, I did that mostly because I was interested in it. Like, what am I interested in? And I had no idea where that would lead. And eventually I got my first job in designing microelectronic circuits at a company called Bell Telephone Laboratories, which doesn't exist anymore, but did at the time. And did that for a long time, 20 years. And I didn't do the same job all the time. I didn't work for the same person that whole time. But worked on various different projects for different people, and met a lot of people there. My wife was an engineer there, and I met her there. Didn't know her, and we met and got married. So, and a lot of my friends came from there. We were in our 20s, and we were all new people working, and it was a lot of fun to do that in addition to the work. After a long time of doing that, I remembered that I got into this because I liked science and people walking on the moon, and people weren't doing that anymore, but I was still interested in it, and I wasn't doing anything that had to do with that. And so at one point, I was volunteering as a planetarium. I was giving presentations in a local planetarium because I was interested in it. It reminded me, like, oh yeah, space is kind of cool. I wonder if I could get into that. And I decided I would apply to go back to graduate school, go back to college to learn astronomy, and applied. You have to apply, and you don't always get in for something like that. And I was surprised when a college in New Mexico State University, accepted me and said, "Yeah, we'll let you come here and study astronomy." So that's what led me to that. So, did I plan all that out in some big story when I was a teenager? No. What I've done is tried to follow what I like to do. A lot of the times it led me to something that was interesting. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes I do something and say, well, now I'm not as interested in this anymore, and something new is coming up. So be aware that make a choice based on what you think you'd like to do. Trust your own feelings of what you find interesting. Because if you're working on something that's interesting, it's better than working on something that isn't interesting, even if it makes more money, is my opinion. You need to make enough money to live, but money isn't the only reason to pick a particular thing. So I wouldn't even pick engineering just for the money. If you don't like doing it, it'd be a miserable job for the money. But if you like doing it, yeah, you don't worry about it so much. You make good money, but other jobs do that as well. And I want to emphasize, like at the spaceport and at the companies that work at the spaceport, there's engineers and there's scientists, but there's also business people, there's finance people, they're businesses. So there's all kinds of jobs that any business has. And some of those people, they're in finance, and they could be in finance anywhere, but a lot of them say, well, I'm kind of interested in what goes on in space companies and related things, and I'm not designing them, but I'm involved in it, and I'm part of that. So even what job you pick, the next question would be, well, where would I want to do that thing that I'm learning to do? And again, follow what's interesting. If you like finance, but have some interest in science, but never wanted to be a scientist or an engineer, maybe you'll just end up at a company that does that and that needs, business people and marketing people and sales people, like every other company does. So I would say, everyone keeps saying, what are you going to do when you grow up? I haven't figured it out yet. I don't think I ever did. I'm glad I didn't, because it means every few years I try to find something new to do, and it pushes you to have new experiences and live in new places. I never believed I would ever live in New Mexico, for instance. It seemed like some exotic place when I didn't even know about it when I was growing up in Pennsylvania. And now here I live, and I love living in this nice climate here in the desert. So so my advice is no formula as far as I know, but trust what you like. If you find that and you're working in it, you'll meet other people who like the same thing. And that's where the real fun is. Where you work, you're going to be working with people, and you want to get along with them, and you want to sort of share the same interests. Then your job will be much more enjoyable. So search out where those people are and be yourself. So I would say I'd never have a typical day. So I have the title engineer, which is a very general. I know if you're in high school, you might hear that as a career that you might be interested in, or you hear like you should be interested in. You don't have to be, but it's a very vague term. And I have to say that even being an engineer, I can't describe it perfectly well, except it's kind of applying science to problems, the real world problems, to make something or design something or solve a problem for somebody else. So a day here could involve being at home or in the office, talking to customers. I'm in what's called the business development group, which means we have a spaceport and people come here to do stuff. They're our customers. So think of it as like a mall, but it's open ground. And the customers are like the stores. Like, I want to use part of your spaceport, and they want to do something. They want to launch something. They want to test a rocket. They want to test something that flies with wings. So we spend some days I spend times in meetings talking to some of these customers who are thinking about coming here. Some that have decided to do that and are paying to do that, and we're planning what they're going to do when they get here. A lot of times they'll come visit. So I'll go up to the spaceport, and we'll actually meet at the site and look around at an area that they might be planning to use. and talk it out. Other things that I've done are a lot of outreach. So we're a state of New Mexico entity. We actually belong to the state of New Mexico. So I'm a state employee. So one of the points of the spaceport isn't just to provide this capability to launch things into space. It's to also provide a place to talk about space to all the schools and give encouragement to anyone who thinks that might be interesting. They don't have to work at the spaceport, but to get into the area, to the field. They could work in our local state or get jobs anywhere. So we're trying to spread the word of what it is, kind of like what we're doing today, and let people know that if that's what they're interested in, they should try for it and see what day-to-day things we do. So a lot of times we'll go out to schools, or they'll come visit us, or we'll do something online. We may give formal presentations. We may make videos. We may launch little model rockets. Depends on the age group. And I've given talks from grade school to rocket clubs at universities. And it's interesting because it's all the same kind of talk, but at different levels. But everyone has the same kind of questions. So it's very interesting, and that's a good part of the job as well. And then, it's many days I'm there for launches, either supporting the customer or a lot of times backup. So there'll be many of us there at one time. In our spaceport, we have 20 people. So it's not a lot of people that actually work for the spaceport for the state of Mexico, but we have over 200 customers who work there every day. So that's sort of the point of the spaceport. We're a support organization to help people do work at the spaceport and bring jobs to the area. Okay, well, I would say and again, I've had an engineering career and then more of a science astronomy career. Now I'm back to the engineering, or sort of a mixed career. So the engineering career, you essentially need a 4-year degree, so a bachelor's degree from some college. Almost all of them have engineering degrees. Some have very specialized ones if you need that. But there's lots of colleges that offer those kinds of degrees. So, and almost all engineering jobs you could easily get with a 4-year degree. But less than a 4-year degree, there's technician's jobs. So there's a lot of other jobs too that support engineering. That an engineer, you might be a project leader and you're designing things, and even if you're not their boss, you're leading a team of people to help build something. And some of those people are technicians. They might have 2-year degrees and they're very specialized. And so their job is a little more routine. They're using some kind of software over and over again. There's some people I know that did that though, and they were really good at it and they loved it. They didn't want to be a 4-year engineer. They wanted to be a 2-year engineer. So those are two avenues, a technician kind of a thing. And that could be in medical services, medical technology, any kind of thing. Welders, people at SpaceX now, they're asked for a lot of welders because they're building a lot of stuff out of metal and welding. So lots of skills that are used there. But again, most engineers have a 4-year degree. To be an astronomer is very much like if you want to work professionally as a biologist or a chemist or a physicist. And that requires a doctorate in general. You could get jobs in limited cases with a bachelor's degree or master's degree. But in reality, what those people are really doing is original research and using money from the government, from NASA or from the National Space Foundation or some organization like that. And that money generally goes to people who have spent more than the 4 years of their first degree, another 4 to 8 years to get a doctorate in their specialty in astronomy. And that's what I did when I came here. It took me 7 years. It was very enjoyable because I was with a whole bunch of students that were all studying astronomy, and all the professors were astronomers. So it wasn't like I'm just reading things in books. I'm doing astronomy with astronomers during that time. I'm not doing it maybe particularly well in the beginning, and then by the end, you're doing it better when you feel you could do that on your own, was sort of the point. So if you're going into a science, you do have to be prepared to spend more time, almost like the amount of time that a medical doctor does without the residency. So, but again, if it's what you want to do, it's an enjoyable path. It's challenging, but you are doing what you want to do. I learned so much about astronomy. I was a very big fan of it and read all I could, get my hands on, but I couldn't take it to another level until I went to an astronomy graduate program. So, and then once you have that, there's no particular certificates. The degrees are it. And in the process of getting the degrees, you often do projects, you do papers, and it's those projects and papers in each of those fields, either engineering or science, that you're showing off when you're looking for a job. So you just don't say, well, I got a nice GPA in my which is good to have. But in reality, you want to say, well, we worked on this project. A lot of the students, for instance, that come to Spaceport from universities are in rocket clubs. Some of them have nothing to do with their classwork. They made a club, and the university lets them use their facilities to build big rockets to launch, and then they launch them at a place like the spaceport. And they do it because it's fun. But in the end, they also, when they come here for a competition, then SpaceX is here, and Blue Origin's here, and Virgin Galactic is here, taking resumes. So it was the project that gets the people realizing, like, these are the people who are really interested in it because they're doing it and they're having fun with it, and they're figuring out the problems on their own, because we want those kind of people to do it. So again, follow what you want to do. When you're in school and in college, think of the projects that you start getting involved with, not just as assignments, but as experience, and test it out. See if you like it. I mean, it's not always fun because sometimes it's hard, but if it's interesting, it's worth getting involved in. So again, trust your feeling. You won't like every project you do as an engineering student or an astronomy student or some other student, but others you will. And that process, you're learning what you're about in that, and then follow what you think is interesting, because when you're talking to people in interviews, they'll catch that. When you get interested, when you try to tell them something that you think is scripted, what you're supposed to say, you can figure that out if you're interviewing somebody. But if then you talk about, oh, and then tell me about your rocket club, and you were really interested in it, and even if you didn't do everything, but you did one really important thing that you like, you start talking about it like really excited like this, they catch that, and then they are interested in you, and you're interested in them. So what you're sort of trying to find out again when looking for a job is finding the people that are like you, and then your job is something that's worth doing. So you can sort of tell by my age, I'm getting towards the end of what people would call retirement, although I don't even know what that means either. So I've already done weird twists and turns. I didn't follow a traditional career all the way till I was ready to retire. I jumped straight out of one into a different one. I made money being an engineer, and then I made a lot less money being an astronomer. So again, I didn't let that steer me in what I wanted to do. And so I think moving forward, and so I don't know what's going to happen exactly in 5 years. I can only say right now, if I've looked at all the things that I do, the thing that excites me is what we call the outreach stuff, which is talk to people exactly what we're doing, talk about careers. I love to see them one-on-one or in groups when they start asking questions. It was similar to what I did in a planetarium when I volunteered that got me to eventually apply to schools to be an astronomer. So I want to do more and more of that. So my plan is, I don't know what that means. It may mean I'll work less. I might make less, but as I'm getting older, that's the thing I'm enjoying. And I feel like I'm doing a good job in it. You can sort of tell when you have an audience and they get excited, or they tell you their stories, and they want to do something different. And that's cool too. So I don't expect everyone that I talk to want to follow me. I want them to learn to follow themselves and explain that that's what they should do, but don't sell themselves short. If you want to be an astronomer and you think, oh, I could never get a PhD in astronomy. Well, I thought that too. So yeah, I think everybody who does it thinks that at some point. So don't feel like you're alone in that. So I would say, just follow what you want to do. And I'm thinking I'm going to probably do more of stuff that connects me to one-on-one with people. Yeah. Again, I would say, if you go on the internet, it'll tell you all these rules of what to do. Some of them are good pieces of advice, but I'd stop with before you do that and just think about what you like and be honest with yourself, and don't necessarily follow money. Money is real. Job security is important to some people, but think about what you want to be. When you see things on TV, I saw a moon landing. If you see a SpaceX launch and you think, oh, that would be really cool, I'd love to work at SpaceX. Well, figure out what things you might have to do that. And then you may not still up at SpaceX by the time you go through that process and maybe get through college. There may be another company that you want to work for, or maybe SpaceX will turn you down. And your life isn't over. Another company you'll find out was just as cool or cooler to work for that exists then. So trust that feeling. Think about it. Think about, what do I watch? I mean, I had two sons and they played video games all the time. So yeah, not everyone's gonna become a video game developer, but you also do other things. You daydream. What are your daydreams about? If your daydreams about what you're doing in the future I'd love to, do what that person does, somebody in your life or somebody you saw on TV. Not because they're famous, but because they look like they really like what they're doing, or they're talking about going to Mars. And I don't know what that means, but I'm going to try to find a job that has something to do with going to Mars or sending people to Mars. And I'm picking, of course, space examples because that's what I'm interested in, but it could be different for anyone here. So do that. If you have friends who are share that, if you're in this little, like I said, I was in a nerdy clique, which, some people found funny, but I enjoyed. If whoever your friends are, and if they share your interests, talk with them about it, and don't feel alone. But if you are the only person you know of that feels the same way you do, that's okay too. And search out maybe on the internet. It makes it easier now to do that. Chat rooms or something where people talk about that and ask people questions. One thing I've always found, and it's sort of intimidating at first, is talk to someone and ask them, what should I do? A teacher, somebody at university, an adult, somebody on a chat room, an astronaut came and talked to you one day, maybe they'd answer a question. It's surprising how they like having people ask them questions. So sometimes feel like, well, I don't want to ask a stupid question. Well, they enjoy it because it shows interest, and everyone likes to feel like you're interested in the thing I'm doing. So it feels good. So I'd encourage you to reach out, and then once you hear what you need to do, then you need to do it. If it's going to college and getting a 4-year degree in engineering, start researching them. Again, use whatever resources that you have or people that can help you do that. You don't have to go to MIT. If you can, great. But there's all kinds of levels of colleges. Don't let that be a discouraging factor either. Search for what you can do. Everyone teaches the same thing, and people from all levels get into NASA sites, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, SpaceX. If you looked at the backgrounds of all those people, they don't all come from super genius families in any sense. A lot of them come. Their interest became because they just were more interested in it than the average person, and they just kept on it, and that was what got them there.